All right. Good evening, everybody. How you doing? How you doing, Waffles?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me as usual.
Thanks. All right. So today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be breaking out of our usual talking about Sonic and talking about something little bit more near and dear to my heart. There's the show, as the thumbnail and pretty much everything about this video suggested. We're going to be talking about Loonatics Unleashed, a franchise, part of the Looney Tunes franchise that I think gets justifiably criticized, but I think to a ridiculous degree that I think a lot of people make the wrong points about. So, and for just to give a little bit of background here, I ended up watching the show when it ended up coming out all the way back in 2005 when I was in middle school. Waffles here has not seen it at all, and so today it's mainly just going to be us having a little bit of a conversation, getting a little bit more into the details of the show, and just talk a little bit more about it. Yep. So you ready to start, Waffles?
Yeah, and I guess for people wondering, well, why is the fuck is he in here if he doesn't have anything to add? So the point of this is going to basically be that Lav is obviously coming at it from a perspective of kind of, obviously seeing the show and having, years and years of hearing like other people's perspectives. And I kind of get to act as like the mediator in terms of like, all right, so like, what about this angle, Fred? Like, what do you think of that idea? So I'm more here to just be like a soundboard to bounce these kind of concepts off of. So that's kind of the role I aim to play. So
Yeah.
just in case anyone's like, well, what the fuck is Ian gonna say? Ian's gonna ask all the questions you might be asking, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
I don't
good.
think
That's
most people, because I don't think most people have seen the show.
yeah.
They mostly just
And
kind of write it off, right? Which is sort of your first point, right?
yeah. And as someone who is a fan of the series, go ahead and keep it that way, please. um, while I do end up liking a good chunk of this premise. The biggest frustration I have is that it is not that good of a series. But to give a little bit of a background for it, so yes, this is obviously meant to be connected to the Looney Tunes, but the whole idea is that about 700 years in the future, to be exact, 2772, according to the show's opening, a giant meteor hits the planet of Acme Metropolis, causing a bunch of random people in the city to gain superpowers, which of course leads to which six of the people who ended up gaining those powers are the descendants of the Looney Tunes, the six characters we see before us, and they are collected together uh, by a mysterious woman named Zadavia in order to go out and fight crime throughout the entire city. Because of course that's what they have to do, and that's what ends up being the core of the premise. The Now, one of the main criticisms that the show gets is that the series tries to be way too edgy and way too grim, dark, and serious, especially when it comes to especially when it comes to the premise, everything about the show, and
The
that's when
aesthetic,
huh?
the aesthetic,
Yes,
even like the idea that it's like they're unleashed.
yes, no, exactly. Now, when it comes to the aesthetic, I 100% agree. Like these, everything about these, when it comes to this weird black, constantly black designs, I have no idea what they were trying to go for. What they were really trying to go for this, other than one, Batman Beyond was just coming off the air at the time, and they thought that could be a good idea for using that as a combination of the premise, especially since that was also a bit of a cyberpunk story. But secondly, and in particular, the creators for the show, as far as the creators for the show, are also the same showrunners for the series SWAT Cats. That also had a bit of the same kind of same kind of grim dark suits on anthropomorphic characters. And maybe they thought they could also apply that to this series as well. And while I to a certain extent can kind of respect the idea of trying to do something different than Looney Tunes, that absolutely makes no goddamn sense to try to apply that to characters who, let's be honest, look like this, and then trying to give them give them this weird cyberpunk aesthetic. And what makes it even more frustrating is, as I kind of showed earlier, they were meant to look even more like this.
Yeah.
And no, now there's always been this kind of theory, this whole thing going around at the time that there's one kid who ended up coming across the designs, and he ended up launching a petition in order to get them redesigned. I don't know if that's true, but regardless, it was the right call. And what makes it even more frustrating is that they are, especially in season one, they are never out of these suits. We even see them not only hanging around their own place, but even when they're sleeping, they are still in these suits, which just goes into a completely different problem, which I'll get to later. But what makes this but here's the thing: what makes me hate this criticism, because while it's true about the aesthetic, when it comes to people who are criticizing the show, especially ones who assumedly did try watching it, that is not the case here. Everything about this, like when it comes to the premise, especially in season 1, most of the episodes are just about random character with superpowers ends up coming into the city planet, tries to either put the planet into total darkness, tries to steal a bunch of stuff, wants to go crazy with the weather, etc. And then the Loonatics come in, stop them. Loonatics come in, stop them. Day safe. There is literally nothing edgy. There is nothing grimdark or serious about this premise at all. It goes right. It's premise-wise, it's actually not too different from other shows that are coming out at the time, which would be like Xiaolin Showdown and Teen Titans. But Teen Titans. So whenever I've seen so many people try doing like full essays and criticisms of the series, and they always end up calling like, "Oh, the show is so edgy." It is not. It is, if anything, it is too by the numbers and too boring, which is one of the biggest problems about it. Which also leads to one of the other big problems about it. It's not funny, which honestly I think is a bigger sin than anything else about the show. So
does it try to be funny? Like, does it have
yes,
jokes?
it does try. It actually does try to be funny. It tries to, like, for example, like when it comes to the main character, when it comes to the quote unquote main character here, Bugs, they do try to give him like the snappy one-liners that you would not only expect from that you would expect from like your own classic like Spider-Man, other superheroes of his kind, but also trying to give him like that little sass snark like Bugs. But the problem is that he not only is he never thrown against someone who he can like properly like snark back and forth against, especially in season 1. But on top of that, they're never funny. Most of them end up like one of the first episodes leads to him just doing the trying to do the duck season, rabbit season bit with the villain, with the duck season, rabbit season thing with the villain, such as the villain is coming in saying, "We're going to take over the planet." And he just goes, "No, you won't." And yes, we will. And it just does that for like 4 or 5 exchanges. And I'm like, y'all doing the first episode and y'all fucking up the duck season, rabbit season bit. Like, yeah, no. And that's a consistent problem throughout all the show's comedy. Honestly, and the saddest part is the only one who's consistently attempts at being comedic kind of work are Daffy, but that's only because they make Daffy such a punchable little shit that that at least the suffering or torturing he gets kind of seems justified. But even then, it's never funny. It's just more, please go away. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Does it generally try to go for slapstick, or more of like is it like, you know, let's say they're doing like the duck season, rabbit season thing? Is it kind of aware of this idea of like, oh, see, that's when you're supposed to laugh, and it kind of has maybe like a slower pacing to it? Whereas like obviously Looney Tunes is all about like just perfect comedic timing with like the music and the framing. Like everything about like a Looney Tunes gag is just completely timed to everything. Everything is synced up for maximum comedic effect. Whereas like I would assume from like the way you're describing it and from the little bits I've seen here and there, it kind of has this idea of like, it's like, yeah, it's a generic action show, but it's like, oh, we're supposed to have the jokes. We're Looney Tunes, so like throw in that joke, but like with no regard for like how that would be paced or directed or shot or timed with the music.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it does seem like they are trying to do similar jokes to Looney Tunes, but yeah, there's no proper timing when it comes to making sure the jokes work, no proper framing to make sure that the jokes are set up properly or paid off in a way that's actually endearing. So endearing or even funny. So it just ends up just kind of so a lot of the jokes in the show just come off like really flat duds almost every single time. It's like, that I would actually argue is the biggest offense of the show, not the fact that it's edgy. All right. To roll into it a little bit, you know, I was going to talk a little bit about how some shows have tried making fun of the series, like Animaniacs ended up taking a pot shot at them, and Teen Titans Go also tried taking a shot, which no, no, they don't. They just never get to. But we don't need to talk about that too much. Let's just try rolling into the character a little bit. So each of the characters are meant to be quote unquote descendants of each of the original Looney Tunes. So we got uh, Ace Bunny, Lexi Bunny, meant to be descendants of Bugs and Lola, but it's never shown or implied that they're supposed to be descendants of the other. So whether Bugs or Lola ever got together or not, it's kind of made unclear. I would want to try going into more detail about it, but let's be honest, they did not think about that far ahead. Honestly, that's what kind of makes the show a little weird. I know that they want to try to do the cyberpunk thing, but I think they should have just treated this like its own AU instead of trying to make it seem like, oh yes, all of them are meant to be descendants of the original characters, even though that doesn't really add anything other than just one random woman just going like, oh, I knew their ancestors from all 700 years ago, which is a background character that doesn't even show up again. So we'll just go ahead and just roll into it a little bit. But when it comes to the 6 characters, we end up having Ace, and I already I'll talk about him a little bit, but to give a little bit of context, each of these 6 characters are meant to have their own particular superpowers. Some of them are meant to be based off of the original powers that they end up having from the original shorts. Like for example, how the Tasmanian Devil would end up spinning around in his tornadoes. Slam Tasmanian here, that ends up being one of his main abilities, where he can actually just spin around and just take stuff out. Roadrunner not only ends up getting super speed, but also ends up getting extra abilities on top of that, like GPS positioning, which don't ask me how that works. They use it like twice and then drop it. But then you end up getting some creative ones like with Tech, which honestly I feel like he's one of the few characters that they actually seem to put some amount of thought into how he's supposed to work, and actually could be a little clever with them. For example, you know how in the original shorts, whenever Wile E. Coyote would ever end up trying to go for like some type of gadget with acting gadget and end up blowing up in his face, and he just turned to like dust and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the next segment, he'd end up being back to normal and like fine, like nothing happened.
Yeah.
So they end up making his power actual regeneration. So whenever he ends up like taking a deadly blow, he ends up just turning into a pile of dust and it just regenerates like nothing ever happened. Which they do end up using to some comedic effect, but it's never timed properly or set up in a way that's meant to like really make it effective. Like for example, in one scene where he's trying to plug something in for a laser gun to go off, so they can attack a bad guy they're fighting. He ends up trying to plug it in, but it's just like 6 feet. It's like 4 or 5 feet short for it to be able to plug in properly. So he ends up placing his fingers on the plug and then puts his ears in the outlet in order to complete the circuit, but ends up electrocuting and turning himself into dust. Which is like not a bad joke, but it's not set up properly in a way that. But like I said, it's like a. Actually, let me ask you this. I know I kind of described it a little really flatly, but would you say that there's a way to try to make that kind of joke work?
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, like, I think what I'm getting at from like a lot of the stuff, and again, just from the little bits and pieces I've seen, because I've seen like reviews and stuff of it,
Mm-hmm.
is the show just kind of seems to like it kind of has like the aesthetic and the concepts that are pretty interesting and cool, but the
Mm-hmm.
show seems to like get bogged down a lot in just like trying to also be Looney Tunes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems like what you're kind of saying is like if you had, maybe taken the spirit of Looney Tunes in terms of like maybe some of the like the premises of the jokes that could, or like the gimmicks of the characters, that could have been cool, and translate that to like an action setting with a bit of personality to it. But instead it seems like they're all constantly trying to like just hang out in the middle while
Mm-hmm.
also having like kind of like a visual identity crisis. So yeah, it seems like I think that it would totally make sense, but the show's structure itself just seems like it's not allowing these things to land.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. It is it really seems like to kind of build on that a little bit, it does seem like they're trying to be that when it comes to the show, while it wants to try to be a Looney Tunes show, a Looney Tunes action show, it ultimately only really succeeds at being a bare bones Saturday morning cartoon action show with Looney Tune tropes slapped on top, of it. But I would want to try stressing right now, because one of the things I hate that people end up talking about the show is that they end up saying that the problem with the show is that there's no way to try to make the Looney Tunes work in a superior format. And for something that we ended up talking about on this channel, I think probably about a year ago at this point, I would like to try to have a discussion with you about this and say that is not true. Because one of the things that I last year we ended up talking about a show called Avatar Sentai Dawn Brothers. Basically, long story short, Power Rangers is still alive and well in Japan, and one of the series in Japan was meant to be based off of a fairy tale in Japan. And one of the things about that series in particular is really just about how crackpot the entire cast is, not only in terms of their abilities, their personalities, but in particular how they even look. Like, for example, even getting to the even getting to the point of not only having two CGI characters, but one of them is an 8 foot tall bird and a 3 foot tall Sonic character. And one of the things about not just this show, but really this franchise overall, is that while it is a superhero series deep down. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Waffles. This is basically also a live action cartoon.
Yeah, it very much embraces like that kind of like manic energy. Kind of reminds me of like Ned's Declassified, where like, that's like a live action like sitcom comedy basically, but it's basically just a cartoon.
Yeah.
The way all characters act, like even the sound effects, the pacing, it's all paced like a cartoon would be, and then the actors have to work around that, and that kind of gives even more intrinsic comedy because it's like real people or whatever. Guys in suits, in Sentai's case. And they usually will time it to like some really energetic music and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like it really indulges in that idea.
Right. So I could honestly try breaking down a lot of the show in particular, but I think some people have correctly ended up criticizing some of the other elements when it comes to this show. So I'll just rapid fire through those really quickly. Ace is basically trying to be Ace. They end up setting up as the basic standard leader, but could be a little bit quirky and snarky. But not only does he not have the cleverness or the comedic setup to be, or have the proper comedic timing that Bugs does, they don't set him up to be a proper leader, as they never really establish how he ends up relating to or interacting with the rest of the cast. He barely, most of the time when he ends up trying to shout out commands, is he was just saying, "Hey, Slam, go do a thing," or "Tech, make the tech so we can make the technology so we can beat this guy." He's not, and I don't say that in a way that he's supposed to be like bossy or controlling. It's just more he is here to just move the plot forward. He's just here to move the plot forward. It's not really about showing what Bugs would be like in a superhero story. It's just, hey, let's have your generic superhero leader, but he happens to be a Bugs Bunny descendant. And same thing kind of applies to all of them. We got Lexi Bunny. She is the girl. She can be kind of sarcastic and snipey towards the rest of the cast, but again, some of the insane premises they end up getting into, but they never really think through what her character arc is supposed to be, or how she's supposed to function with the rest of the cast. Same thing goes for Tech. He is here to be the condescending smart guy. Does that incredibly well, and I actually do think that they write his character relatively well, but they don't really do anything else with them beyond that, except for the one scene that I saw going around Twitter a little while ago. With the Roadrunner Rev here, who they kind of try playing like he's supposed to be the soft baby boy of the group, but that only really happened like 1.5 episodes when his brother ends up showing up, and he ends up having to kind of try to support him when his family is ultimately making him come out to be like the favorite, while his little brother is the one who's kind of getting insulted or put down by his family. But nothing really comes out of it beyond that. Slam is just the no talking big dude. Not really much characterization going around, besides just he likes hitting things hard, and not really much else coming from that. However, and then we have Duck, who I will say is probably the closest to his counterpart, but since he's not allowed to contrast or and if I may be so bold, to be the proper checked boyfriend of Bugs, he's just kind of the cocky punchable guy who usually ends up making things worse before he ends up making anything better, and you just kind of go half the time, "Why are you here?" Other than just to stroke your ego. So
Mhm.
he just ends up just kind of being frustrated. So they all just end up kind of being really interesting to work. Really interesting attempts at trying to bring Looney Tunes into a superhero story, but all kind of fail because the writers at the end of the day were never really that interested in trying to do doing any type of character work. Which for a premise like this, correct? Please feel free to disagree with me. You kind of need to if you're going to if you're going to try to take the Looney Tunes into a superhero series, that kind of needs to be the focus is doing more doing character work, probably even more so than you would with most shows if you're not going to make it if you're not going to make an outright superhero parody.
I was gonna say if it's not gonna be outright comedy, the characters need to kind of sell it. Uh,
Mhm.
and obviously, like even better would be if you had great characters and like the comedy. But,
Yeah.
but like yeah, you could probably get by if it was just fucking hilarious. And in that sense, you would endear people to the characters because assumedly they would all have like a different style of joke or comedy that would still work off. So like regardless, you should have a good character. It's just how
Mhm.
to get there. But
Mhm.
since the show doesn't seem to be like focusing on comedy, I'm guessing what it's really focusing on is like all the characters kind of exist. Every now and then they might get like a bit more like not personal focus, but just like focus, I guess in general. Because
Mhm.
I would imagine there's a lot of episodes where like a lot of the characters are just like there,
Yes.
not really adding much, and therefore it kind of creates this kind of feeling of like yeah, like this sure is a show with these pretty neat designs and a neat concept and it's like a large cast of characters and they are sure just being superheroes, I guess.
Yes. And that's what kind of makes it a little bit frustrating in particular. Like I don't think you can't do both where you actually can make this a bit of a parody, but also try to make this like an actual not down to earth, but an actual superhero story where where you can have moments where you're taking things seriously and actually trying to build on and building on your own premise properly. Like honestly, I've seen Sentai do that a couple of times myself, especially with with I'm not kidding here, the train theme Sentai, which I've seen this one Twitter account been posting a lot of clips from, which still reminds me how good the show is. But that's where I think this show in particular kind of drops the ball. Like for example, while I don't think the premise is like the edgiest thing in the entire world. The worst part about it is that premise doesn't factor much into the story. Like they try making like in the opening monologue, they always say like the asteroid ended up hitting the planet, knocking the planet off of its axis. That never comes back into the story. All the asteroid really does is just give a bunch of people random superpowers, and they never really go into like any type of like a the cataclysmic event or any other type of fallout that came from, which I don't think they need to. But all it really amounts to is random characters get superpowers, and they never really do anything on top of that. Just rather than just having one character show up, they end up causing problems. They end up causing problems just because they're either pissy at someone that day, or they just want to rob, or they just want to end up robbing somebody, and superheroes show up and then they move on. But that's mostly season one. Season two, on the other hand, the sad part is they do try doing more character work. So first off, they end up avoiding trying to do their own. In season one, they end up trying to make their own villains in particular. So we end up getting characters like Weather. We end up getting characters like Weather Vane. We end up getting like Mastermind here. But then in season two, that's when they try shifting more into doing direct Looney Tune villains and bringing them into the story. So we get like Elmer Fudd as a villain. We end up getting like Yosemite Sam. I'm not even going to try pronouncing that name because that's a whole can of worms I don't even feel like trying to pronounce. And we end up getting other villains like that. But when we get to season two and they do try doing character work, it usually just amounts to character tries going for a particular thing. They end up finding out or trying to support a particular person. They find out that they're being lied to, manipulated. They end up being the bad guy. Day saved, which maybe that would work if we were dealing with like one character supposed to be naive or overly optimistic. But that's just but when it ends up just applying to all the characters, including the one who's supposed to be the descendant of the rabbit trickster, and he ends up just getting tricked by a random character for a random new character that has nothing to do with the franchise. It just seems like it really just seems like they're just kind of going through the motions, and that's the most frustrating part with this. because I've seen people try to say like criticize the show like, oh, it was only made to sell toys, even though toys were never there's never any merchandise of this. Like I didn't even know they made DVDs for this show until like 4 or 5 years ago. There are no toys, no pillows, nothing like that. But when it comes to, but I get why people end up saying that, because when you watch the show, there doesn't really seem to be anything that it wants to try saying with its material. It doesn't try going for any themes. It doesn't try doing anything with the characters. It doesn't try doing anything with its premise. It's just Looney Tunes, superheroes. They're color coordinated. Yay. Which is just kind of sad. And I focus on that in particular because when I end up seeing people, or even sometimes those parodies from other Warner Brothers properties, I always end up saying like, it frustrates me because it feels like everyone's taking the wrong lesson from the show. It should be able to work. It should be able to work. It could easily work, but it needs to come from some. But when you're doing this kind of premise, you need to have something to actually say with the story. What do you say about Looney Tunes in a superhero environment, not just placing them in there? You know?
Yeah, well, and I guess the real kind of disappointing part is that, like, I highly doubt they're ever gonna do this again. So, like,
Oh yeah,
this concept is like gone forever, basically, outside of like, if a fan wanted to do something with them. And so like that kind of creates this scenario of like, it's like, wow, like there was a lot of potential here. But then, obviously they're gonna, no one's gonna be even less likely to like give it a chance, or maybe like create fan art or fan projects about it, because all anyone really thinks about it is like, oh, that's like the edgy Looney Tunes thing. Instead of like looking at it, it's like, no, there was like potential here. And they kind of squandered it. That's kind of what it should be known for. Not that it was just inherently dumb or bad.
yeah. I'll go ahead, and you know what? I'll go ahead and take that segue because why not? So if you haven't been paying attention to anything with Warner Brothers, with like what's been going on with Warner Brothers lately, the CEO has basically just said we don't really get, and so many words, he does not give two shits about animation, or it's really just little kid stuff that we shouldn't even try to think about, and it's just been trying to hack away at everything that has been that is remotely cartoons, even to the point of like right now on Cartoon Network. Like I know most of us don't watch TV that much anymore, but when I am checking it on, it's mainly just either Gumball reruns, Teen Titans reruns, Teen Titans Go reruns to be clear, and like maybe like a couple of episodes of Craig of the Creek every once in a while. They're doing less and less with animation, so they're not only not going to probably not do this at this point because just because of how they end up how this premise ended up being received, which was not well, but also because like the series has gone, but the entire studio has been trying to downplay how much they're trying to do animation, even to the point that they basically had to get a senator involved to finally release one of their animated movies with Wile E. Coyote that may come out this year, but they basically had to get sanctioned for constantly cutting out so many animated properties and cutting them off so they can end up getting a tax cut from it. So the chance of anything happening like this in the near future is slim to none. So that's why I've been doing this for a while, but I've ultimately decided to go. But at one point or another, I decided to say, fuck it. And I wanted to try to, alongside work with a couple of other artists, in particular Deebs SIO, and an artist who's been on here before, who's been on the show before, Crazy Elf. And I've ultimately wanted to try to see what the series could be done properly. With, I'm not gonna say a good creative, with more of a creative focus, on of actually trying to take advantage and utilize on this premise. So, for example, like I said before, one of the weird things about the show is that they never really allowed them to be out of their suits for more than 5 minutes. Season 2, they tried having their moments every once in a while, but the only time it really happened was in their backstories when they show them in full body pajamas for like half the scene, and when they ended up getting when all their power ended up going out and they decided just to use their holodeck in their giant building as a vacation hub. Don't ask. So if I may indulge myself in here, and if you're up for it, I would like to try to do my own little take on, for a little bit, what this series could look like if it was done well. You up for it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So let's start with the basics. Let's focus on their designs a little bit. So I don't hate the I don't hate their let's get a full body for a let's look at their full bodies for a second. I don't think these were horrible designs on their own. Like I don't like the black suits. I would say I like about 50% of the issues, but I would honestly say the other 50%, and I know how minor this is going to be, is Ace's eyes. Like when you're looking at characters, the first place most people tend to look are going to be their faces. And when you're looking at group ensemble, you're most likely going to look at not only the center, but the character who's most likely going to be considered the quote unquote main character of the story, aka the Bugs Bunny insert. And when you end up having a character who's supposed to be Bugs Bunny, who's usually meant to be as much of a, even though he's meant to be like the clever undercutting one, he's usually meant to look unassuming, curved, soft eyes, and you give him these sharp, edgy eyes, square face. It just throws everything off. Yes, I know. I know that seems like that's not the biggest thing in the world, but I feel like that detail. The black suits are like 50% of the problem, and the other 50% of the problem are the fact that Ace has this overly edgy look to him when he really shouldn't. So that's what I wanted to try to fix. One of the things I want to try to fix in particular. So when I was working with Deeb's draws, they go by multiple names. We'll just go with Deeb's. I ended up trying to work with them to give them a bit of redesign. So we ended up going with these first.
Ah, I see, guy.
Yeah.
So
So
definitely softening the aesthetic.
right. So the whole idea, and on top of that, while I do like the idea of giving them, suits instead of them just kind of walking around like they would as their Looney Tunes effects. How they look in Looney Tunes are usually, they should still like look like they still should have moments of being able to look like their Looney Tunes counterparts to some degree instead of just only having at best maybe their outline to them. So I wanted to try to go with this with a little bit with softening their palettes, giving them a bit of a chance to still show off their normal fur patterns and etc. But like, what do you think of these so far?
Yeah, no. Well, I think what I like about it is kind of a more cutesy design, but not like in a like baby Looney Tunes way, but more in like it's kind of what does it remind? I mean, it kind of reminds me of like My Hero Academia, I guess, in a way, of like the kind of just more like softer designs, but still very blocky.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah, no, I think actually that does fit. And actually, to tie this back into what we were talking to the main theme of this artist, to the main theme of this channel. I actually, if you're familiar with either one of these artists, yes, they are both mainly Sonic artists. And honestly, I don't think that is a bad point to start with their designs because. Well, I don't think the Looney Tunes end up leaning too much into Sonic proportions for the most part. I do think using them as a little bit as like a using Sonic design methodology a little bit as the baseline to build on to giving the Looney Tunes a bit more of an anime aesthetic is a good place to start. So we end up giving them giving them bigger but more defined eyes, so you can get an idea to look at their irises, giving them a little bit more balanced proportions, but not overly giant heads like Sonic characters do. So that's why I thought like working with Sonic artists could end up being like a good reference point for them. So that's how these guys end up coming out. On top of that, let's see, do I have a picture with just yes. And then with Crazy Elf, I ended up working with her a little bit more to try to work on on their suits. So this is where one of the other reasons why I brought up Power Rangers in particular. Not only because I think when it comes to mainly Super Sentai, one of the reasons why I thought Super Sentai is a much better reference point is because not only because of how they can do a better job of incorporating comedy into their action set pieces while also still making sure that the characters balance with it properly, but also giving them those bright ass colors is a good way to just kind of show like, yes, we are not here to want to be Batman. We are not here to be edgy. We are here to have fun and be over the top. And I think that's a better reference point here. So with that, I decided to try to give them redesigns for their suits.
Gotcha. And yeah, it seems like you changed their weapons.
Yes. Actually, they didn't really have weapons in the original. They didn't really have weapons in the original series. In the original series, they were mostly just working on powers. But I'm a Power Ranger fan, and I kind of like it when the characters have weapons, especially when they have even weapons that shouldn't have triggers do have triggers, and it just makes them more powerful. I like that. That's cool and fun. So that's one of the reasons. So I decided to give them a little bit more weapons that are meant to tie back into. That's meant to either I feel like could either fit them more aesthetically or stuff I think could be more comedically fun to try to work with when it comes to the characters, or when it comes to what could be comedically fun for them. But honestly, I'm up for trying to change around the weapons. The focus here was mostly on the suits. So here we're giving them a bit more of instead of downplaying the colors. Here is meant to be more emphasizing them, making them brighter, making them stand out a lot more, and making each of the characters and trying to get away from the edginess, quote unquote, edginess of the suits. However, the whole idea here is I still want to make sure that they each come off like their while they each try to come off like their own individual member, they're still meant to feel more or less like they're a team. So they still follow each of the same aesthetic rules, like when it comes to the boots, the shoes, the shoulder pad. But each of them are still meant to kind of have like their own distinctive style to like when it comes to the shoulder pads, and hopefully with modifications to them that I would like to try going for, making them each come off with their own unique aesthetic. So what do you think of this so far?
Yeah, no, well, I kind of like the idea that you lean into usually like the hero will usually be like a blue or a red. Did you have any particular reason you went with something like a gold yellow for Bugs?
Honestly, I went with it because that's what the original was. But to be honest, that is the reason why I wanted to stick with it. Because more often than not, people usually, like you said, people usually tend to default to red or blue when it comes to giving them when it comes to leadership colors. But I thought it could be a cool idea to stick with yellow for the protagonist, as that's a good way to just make him stand out, be the brightest, but also just kind of give it a little bit more of a unique feel to it. Maybe I could try to have a little bit more of a thematic reason for it later on, but I just thought it'd be a good way to stick with colors. However, one character I did change the colors of, and I've gotten some pushback from this, is Lexi, because in the original show she was always meant to be pink, and while I don't think that girls can or can't be pink for any particular reason, like for example, I'm fine with Amy being pink, but here I thought it would be a much better fit to make her blue because if she's blue, the cast is a rainbow, and I'm like, why not make it a fucking why not make the fucking color coordinated team a goddamn rainbow? Like, even Super Sentai, when it came to the Ranger team that's all about trains, imagination, and literally basing their powers off of a rainbow, they never really made the team they never had a proper team as a rainbow until the fucking epilogue movie, which I don't count. And even to this day, they still have not dedicated to having a 6-member team be the 6 colors of the goddamn rainbow. So I'm like, you know what? If they're not gonna fucking do it, I will. So yes. So yeah, let's make them the goddamn rainbow. And yes, it is because all of them. And yes, it is because all of them are gay.
Well, there you go. Well, and also, it seems like with your, like with their version of, what's her name?
Lexi.
It seems like with their version, they were going for that kind of like, I'm pink, but I kick ass kind of vibe. Whereas you just sort of seem to, the way she looks anyway, she's more like, yeah, I'm just here to kick ass and I'm blue.
Yes.
So doesn't seem like it was too big of a deal one way or the other.
No, I've actually shown this design to a handful of people, especially like certain like Loonatics Unleashed fans. Yes, they are a thing, and they've actually been pretty well receptive to the idea of just making her blue and making the whole team a rainbow. And I stand by that because it's like, I think they look better. I think they look better like this because it always bothered. It wasn't like the biggest problem of the show, obviously, but it always kind of bothered me as like, you have a team of color coordinated superheroes. Why is there no blue? Like, yes, red and green and yellow should be there, sure, but you should definitely have a blue. It's weird to not have blue. So it's just like too many warm colors, and I thought, yeah, why not? Let's go ahead and throw in a blue character, try to balance it out a little bit, which I think works.
Yeah.
But the whole idea for the premise, but the thing I thought would be kind of cool for the premise is, instead of doing the whole giant meteor from an alien planet gives all the characters superpowers. I thought it would be a little bit cooler if we went with a different premise. Like, for example, have you ever seen The Boys?
No, but I know what it's about.
Okay, just to keep everyone up to speed, The Boys are meant to be a bit more of a cynical take on superheroes. So, like, what would it be like if superheroes did exist and how they would end up working in society? And here they're meant to be complete fucking, and in The Boys they're meant to be complete fucking sociopathic assholes who are just have very little to no care for how anyone's being affected by their abilities or how they end up going through life. They end up being sponsored by a giant mega corporation who ends up basically marketing them out, using them more as soldiers for hire to not only deal with crime in the streets, but also to basically market them so they can get products out of them, sponsorship deals, etc. And The Boys are meant to be. That's how The Boys end up working. So I thought it could be a good twist to try to ultimately apply that here, where we do end up also having basically Acme Corporation, but also trying to sponsor and manage and even create a bunch of superheroes, but ultimately having a bit of a but on one condition of they don't like having either. No, I'll just go with it. They don't like having quote unquote furries be the ones who end up getting abilities who don't end up being superheroes in the first place. They're fine with hiring them. They're fine with hiring them, even to the point of like Bugs, Tech, Lola, and probably the other three. I'm still oh no, and Rev and Slam even being hired in different capacities, but never to the point of being like being the faces of the company or being allowed to like work being allowed to be on the front or to be a proper superhero. So the whole idea is that once new threats end up coming into the situation, when aliens start coming into the situation, and they end up being beings that the normal superheroes right now aren't able to handle or just too weird for them to deal with. The Looney Tunes, especially Tech in particular, who wants to try to get a chance to actually prove himself to show like, yes, my shit actually is good. I know what I'm doing. They end up trying to ultimately push forward to try to show that yes, they are actually able to do stuff, and they end up doing this in the Looney over the top way possible after all six of them end up forming and pushing forward. So the story ends up being about how they end up not only establishing like how the Looney Tunes actually are really good at fucking with people and trying to put a little bit more respect on the name in comparison to how like Space Jam 2 just went like, oh, I'll send LeBron to the Looney Tunes world. They're too powerful. And I'm like, bro, the Looney Tunes are fucking gods in their own fucking universe. They can literally do anything as long as it's funny. Why? Like, no, they think that's the most broken place you can send them. Uh, but that's getting to Space Jam 2, which is a whole other conversation. But I always thought that could be a cool idea to try to base off of that and work and build on top of that moving it forward. Not only having my own particular take about how to make the Looney Tunes and quote unquote Super Sentai tropes work in this environment as well, but also having my moving forward dealing with stuff with like alien invasions and honestly trying to bring into the question of like not making the aliens an entire centralized being, but actually making them like their own weird faction from their planet who are just looking here to try to conquer so they can make themselves feel big and strong in the first place and have Looney Tunes overcoming that. And as the story progresses, they'd end up dealing with their moving forward with other conflicts as well, even to the point of taking a little bit of a page out of Dawn Brothers, where humans and people on the planet end up being turned into monsters on top of that as well. But one thing I would do last thing about this, the one thing I would do different from The Boys is that I honestly wouldn't make all the superheroes sociopaths. Like, yes, it's very easy to get corrupted and corrupt in that kind of situation. But I actually think it would be kind of better to kind of show how like there are some people here who actually are like genuinely serious about like, yeah, I do want to try helping people. I know my company can be kind of corrupted, fucked up, but I want to try doing what I can. And for example, like I would love to have like Goody Two Shoes, Him Boy, Superman actually have to deal with interact with and have to contrast with with the cynical kind of cocky cynical cocky Bugs here, and ultimately having Bugs kind of realize, you know what, he's not that bad. Yeah, I know he's kind of a simpleton, but he actually is a good guy, and actually having them bond and build on top of that. But that's a whole little stuff about the premise, and I know I'm getting to basically fanfic territory, but I want to try to show like there is room to actually try to develop and actually build onto the story, not just because there actually is a good idea here about trying to show Looney Tunes, who, for the most part, especially when it comes to the shorts, while usually tend to use more subterfuge than just outright destruction, they are still characters who are more or less meant to be characters of karmic justice, usually fuck with people who end up either fucking with them or other people in the process. So why not try to put them in a superhero setting? I do think that could ultimately work for them, and actually try to tell a story and actually go into particular themes with them, instead of just kind of saying, "Hey, here's Looney Tunes superheroes, just go ham." Looney Tunes and superheroes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in your case, you want to really like lean into like, no, guys, this could be fun.
Yeah. Like I'll go in last thing about this in particular. Like, for example, one of the things I really wanted to try to do was to build onto the cast, because while I don't think you have to have like always a completely gender balanced cast. I've always been kind of off by the fact of like, well, Lola being like the only girl in the entire franchise, which makes sense. Like, when you go through the Looney Tunes main cast, there aren't really that many other girls unless you want to get into like Daffy but girl, or Bug, or Porky Pig but girl, or Tasmanian Devil but girl. And I'm like, we can do better than that. Let's try to give some different. And I was like, who do I think could be a good fit to throw into this cast? Who would be a girl who I think could be a good fit into this cast without just making another Distaff counterpart? And there is one, but she's not she's not usually someone who's directly counted in the Looney Tunes, but is technically considered technically kind of related to them overall. But I do think she should be, who I think it could be kind of interesting to have her thrown into this group.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because Slappy, especially when I end up like following this one account on Twitter, is like, no, this girl has some this girl has a lot of good jokes, and has absolutely zero fucks to give. And I think it could be kind of funny seeing her not only having to bounce off of a bunch of these characters who in story would be significantly younger than her, but ultimately having to but also just having like zero fucks to give. So while these guys might be over the top and try and make more of a show out of it, she could just be the character like, look, I absolutely have no fucks to give. Get the fuck out of my blows the bad guy up and just absolutely just run through it. But making her arc more about learning to have fun and not just be completely miserable all the fucking time. So, and on top, however, while I do think Skippy should be involved in the story, I still want to try to make sure all the superheroes are kind of adults, because I'm like, just getting into kid superhero territory, I always think it's just a little on the weird side. So I was like, who do I think could be a good comedic foil for Slappy in particular, who's still meant to be overly optimistic, but also could be a bit full of themselves. So Slappy ripping into them could be a lot funnier. And there's only one character who I realized could be a really good fit for that.
Hey, it's the boy.
It's the boy. And honestly thinking like the Boston old lady with the Southern boomer, I think I think that would honestly just be really good comedic goal in its own right. And yes, if you might be wondering, we did give them suits.
Hey, there they are.
So still meant to be the whole idea is that they would end up falling more into the quote unquote six man trope. So the idea is like after they end up getting spun off, Foghorn trying to be the most Elon Musk possible. It's like, oh yeah, I'll go ahead and fund you guys and try to make you guys even bigger and better than what you guys were ever been before. But ultimately having to go through an arc of like, yeah, being Elon Musk is not only incredibly ineffective for actually doing anything good, is actually completely fucking miserable. You don't want to be. Yes, having money is nice. Being Elon Musk is fucking miserable. Is fucking miserable, not only for himself, but also all the people he ends up causing damage. He ends up having control over. Don't be him. So giving him his own arc about learning like why it's bad to be a boomer. But the idea is ultimately once he ends up seeing these six, he ends up seeing them like trying to fund these six, and ultimately moving forward, he's like, you know what? I'm jumping in the mix. But my assistant Slappy, I'm gonna need some help. Could you follow me along with this? And begrudgingly ends up coming along with them. But once Skippy ends up seeing her in the outfit, and says like, "Oh, Slappy, you're so cool, and now you're even cooler."
Yeah.
She ultimately says like, "Okay, fine, I'm in now." And having these eight ultimately be the main, being the main cast.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you feel like that kind of rounds it out.
Yeah. Yeah, giving a good personality balance to really balance out all eight of them, and giving not only a good personality and honestly age balance for the rest of the cast. So yeah, I do think that there is room for. Wait, sorry, wrong one. I do think there is a way to make this kind of story work in particular, and I would love to try to see if Warner Brothers ever did ultimately try to get back into making animation work, which hopefully could be in the near future. Hopefully is in the near future, whether or not this thing is picked up. I would like to try to see someone try to take another shot at this. If not with my ideas, hopefully with something else, and trying to give a different take on how to make the Looney Tunes work as superheroes. But that's my little take. So Waffles, what do you think?
Yeah, so basically kind of the point of the video is just kind of go through, what are the real problems with Loonatics? What's the value that can be found there? And hey, here's some ideas for what could be taken out of that premise. And obviously, regardless of if it ever gets a show, just more people kind of looking into these characters and maybe doing something with it, even as fan works, is always just something fun. And so you kind of want to express the potential of the series and kind of put your own 2 cents in there.
Yeah, exactly. So, long story short. Oh yeah, actually, no, you basically covered everything. So yeah, that's my own little 2 cents about that. I'm glad you're able to understand that what I was going for, Waffles, and hopefully everyone listening to this understood that too. But yeah, no, Loonatics Unleashed, a 4 out of 10. That should have at least been a 7. Definitely, do not listen to anyone who calls the show edgy. They are wrong. And there's a way to make this premise work, but it requires someone to actually have a story to tell, not just taking Looney Tunes and throwing a superhero stack on top of them.
There you go. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for having me as usual.
All right. Thanks, Waffles, and and we will catch all you guys around next time. All right. See y'all later.
See you.